Welcome to GRE snackable episodes about the GRE, GMAT, and graduate school admissions. I'm Tyler, the founder of Achievable, and we have an affordable GRE course that includes everything you need to ace your exams. A full textbook, videos on key topics, tons of GRE questions backed by a memory-enhancing algorithm, a built-in study planner and essay grader, and full-length practice exams. You can try it out for free at achievable.me, and if you like it, use the code podcast to get 10% off. Now, let's get started. Today, we've got Erfun Guela from GRE Compass. And Erfun, I'd love if you could introduce yourself and your new book.
Sure. So thanks for having me, Tyler. I'm Erfun Guela. I'm a professional GMAT and GRE tutor. I have a perfect score in the GRE, and I had previously written McGraw-Hill's Guide to the GRE for basically publication for the last decade, and I've now adapted that book for the new GRE, published on Amazon, called The Ultimate Guide to the GRE.
Great. Yeah, so today we're going to be talking about how to use GRE tests effectively, both just in general and to prepare for the new shorter GRE. And yeah, I think let's just first but before you start with the tips, let's maybe talk about kind of how the adaptive nature of the test works and how you can, just factor that into kind of how you're practicing.
Sure. So the GRE, for those of you who don't know, it's section adaptive. And basically what that means is that your performance in a given section will determine, well, to take a step back, there are two quant sections, two verbal sections. For quant and for verbal separately, your performance on the first section is going to determine the average level of difficulty of the questions in the subsequent section. So if you do well in the first quant section, you'll get the hard quant section. If you do okay, your next quant section will be medium questions, and if you don't do well, your next quant section will be easier.
Great. Yeah. So then, yeah, let's talk then just about how to practice. So, what's your first tip?
Yeah, so my first tip on how to use practice tests, kind of obvious, but a little bit neglected by some people, is take a diagnostic test. You want to take a diagnostic test to simply establish a baseline and understand your strengths and weaknesses. Now, one issue that arises with some people, they feel hesitant to take a diagnostic test early on in their preparation because they feel, well, okay, I've never done any GRE prep. I'm not going to do well, so what's the point? But the thing is, you're
Mhm.
not taking this diagnostic test to prove anything. You're just doing it to get some data. And yes, early on in your prep, you're not going to get a score you're happy with. That's why you're preparing. But you need to use a diagnostic to get a sense of how far from your actual score goal you are. Sometimes you might be closer than you think, sometimes further away. But if you don't have that information, it's going to be really hard to plan your studying as you move forward.
Great. Yeah, and I think the other thing too is it's important. Like a lot of times, you're kind of preparing for the GRE before you're applying to grad schools, right? And so it, I like taking a diagnostic test early because if you take a diagnostic test and you get like a 600, maybe don't apply to Harvard Business School, right? Like it's pretty difficult. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that generally speaking, if you prepare well for call it 3 months, you will see your scores increase. 50 points is kind of normal, and 100 points is extraordinary. So, it just that gives you some sort of range of like what's possible. Obviously everyone's different, but that's like rough numbers that I've heard from a lot of people, and I think it just gives context to like if you're getting a 550, think that your goal is to get a 650, not a 750.
Yeah, so as far as like translating that to GRE scores, right? It would be like essentially.
Oh, I'm sorry, I totally just used a bunch of GMAT numbers.
I do that a lot too. It's fine. But yeah, a similar idea though. If you're IHBS, their median GRE scores, like 325 ish.
Right.
You're starting, realistically, a 10-point improvement is like a very good improvement. 50-point improvement is fantastic. So yeah, it's similar.
Yeah.
If you're starting at a 310 and eyeing at 325, it's doable, but it's tough. And that's by
If you're starting at 210 and eyeing a 325, it's probably not.
correct. In that case, it's going to be more or less impossible. Um, but yeah, I mean, it also will inform how long you need to study. realizing, okay, let's say you take a diagnostic, you get a 310. I mean, I've seen students go from 310 to 325, from 310 even to 330, but it takes a while. It's not going to be 3 months. That's going to be like, okay, 9 months. And the thing is, all right, fine. If your dream in life is HBS, you take a diagnostic, you see you have a 310, well, all right, I know I have my work cut out for me. I'm going to be studying for 9 months. I mean, that's just the reality you have to confront. But if you don't have that diagnostic, you're never going to really know. And you could end up just
Right.
spinning your wheels.
And you could end up way like undershooting how much studying you actually need. Yeah, that makes sense. Great. Yeah. So then, what is the next tip?
Yeah, so the next tip is don't use practice tests as tools to learn content or strategy. And so what I mean by this
Mhm.
is basically a lot of people want to, after they learn a new, let's say you're in week 3 of your preparation, you just learned a new topic, you
Mhm.
learn percentages. And you say, okay, cool, I learned a new topic. I want to take another practice test to incorporate what I've learned and see how it's reflected in my performance. And
Which like seems kind of reasonable.
it does to some extent. You want to see the incremental gains in your performance, but the issue there is before you've learned all the relevant content and strategies, you almost by definition are going to have some bad habits. And if you
Mhm.
start taking practice tests on a regular basis throughout your preparation, what's going to happen is that under these time conditions, under this pressure, you're going to reinforce those bad habits. And in a lot of ways, you'll actually end up undoing some of the progress that you made. The other issue is just
Mhm.
understanding the way the learning process generally works. It's not going to be that it's the improvement is not linear. It's not always the case that week 2 is inherently going to be superior to week 1, and week 3 is inherently superior to week 2 in terms of your performance on these actual practice exams. Sometimes there's going to be kind of inflection point, maybe around week 6 or week 7, where you'll see a big increase. So if you take these practice tests in the middle of your preparation, number one, you'll reinforce bad habits. Number two, you might get data that won't be too representative because your brain is still sort of consolidating a lot of the knowledge and skills that you acquired.
Mm. Yeah, and also I think that it will. I mean, is there like also even like a chance for false positives, or like you do well and you're like, cool, I learned that, and then you stop practicing it?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, it's just that the if you're trying to use that data to inform your study as you move forward, you have to realize it is only one practice test. You may have done well in percentage on one practice test. It doesn't mean you fully mastered that topic. It could just be that
Right.
just noise, right? There's only 3 or 4 questions overall. Maybe they just worked in your favor on that random practice.
Right. Great. Yeah. Then what is tip number three here?
Yeah, so going from how not to use them back to how to use them. So you do want to use practice tests to develop proper time management and guessing strategy. I'd say this is after the diagnostic test. This is the primary use of practice test. So, uh, toward the end of your preparation, after you internalize a lot of the necessary skills and knowledge, you want to make sure you practice them under time conditions. With respect to the way the scoring algorithm works. And yeah, so at this point, well, that's how we're going to use the practice test. You want to use them to understand, okay, am I short on time? Am I going too fast? To consequently develop time management strategies to account for whatever your tendencies are. For some people, that might mean creating timing benchmarks where it's okay, after every 4 questions, I should have this much time left. Let me adjust accordingly. For some people, this might mean, okay, I know I'm always short on time on verbal, so let me just make sure I'm blindly guessing on a couple RC questions. But, you're going to hit a certain point in preparation where you need to see how what you finally learn is going to be implemented on the real thing. And yeah, that's how you'll take advantage of the practice.
Well, what I've found also is that like the real thing is totally different than the practice in a lot of ways because like if you know how to solve a problem 100% correctly in 4 minutes every time, that's useless, right? Like, and that's just the kind of thing that is not really intuitive until you're doing it.
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you, the exam is about fundamentally it's an exam about time management and making sure you're
Mhm.
doing things within proper time constraints. And you're not like if you're just kind of casually doing questions, getting them right, spending 4 minutes on it, you won't realize the issue until you actually take the practice test and it tells you, yeah, cool, your accuracy might be high, but you're not answering half the questions because you're going way too slowly.
Right. Great. Yeah, then what is tip number four?
Tip number four is kind of an extension of this, which is you do want to save most of your practice tests for the end of your preparation. As we already discussed, if you take them in the middle of your preparation, that will very often lead to bad habits. It'll lead to somewhat of a distorted sense of your progress. Whereas you save it for the end after you've internalized all the knowledge and skills, and you'll use the practice test to continue working on your time management, your guessing strategy.
Great.
To add to that, in terms of like how long, like, over what time frame you should be taking these practice tests and how frequently. Um, what I generally recommend, I mean, obviously this can vary, but high level, the last month of your preparation should be dedicated to practice tests, and you should be doing
Mhm.
1 to 2.
Well, and doing them and then following up on them, which is always like blows me away how many people don't do this. But like go and like after you've done the practice test, like actually go ahead and like review what you got right or wrong and why, and then like do more questions like the ones you got wrong.
Yeah, exactly.
Or
Yeah,
like
yeah. That like you want to use the practice for the time management and guessing strategy, but also just to realize, wait a minute, I'm actually shakier than I thought on probability or technically, or whatever the case may be. Yeah, absolutely.
yeah, great. Yeah, then what's the next tip?
Yeah. So the last tip is, to the extent possible, you want to use official practice tests only. When I say official, what I mean is the practice test published by ETS. So
Mhm.
where do we find these? Basically, when you go into ets.org/GRE, you should have a student portal. And within there, there's a link, My Test Preparation and Services. And then from there are various practice tests. So, heads up to the listener, there are two free practice tests. They're called PowerPrep. There's PowerPrep 1 and PowerPrep 2. This is very annoying, but for whatever reason, ETS has made PowerPrep 1 untimed. They just did that recently. I don't know why. I'm trying to figure that out. But because it's untimed, it's not going to really be as useful. So,
Well, you can time yourself.
yeah, you can time yourself for sure. Yeah, I mean, that's what you'd probably want to do with PowerPrep 1. So you could use that as a diagnostic. And then PowerPrep 2 is also free. And then there are what's called PowerPrep Plus, which are also official exams, but these are ones you would have to pay for. They're about roughly $30 per exam. A little bit pricey, but in
Mhm.
my opinion, very much worth it. The nice thing about those paid exams, they also tell you the level of difficulty of the questions, which is actually really
Mhm.
useful upon review to be able to, in particular, identify, oh, wait a minute, I just missed a gimme. What happened? Why am I missing so many level 2s, level 3s? They also provide pretty good intuitive explanations for all the questions.
Right. Yeah, and that's the thing is like, yeah, like Achievable has GRE practice tests too, and you can use them, but they're really, I think they're like the warm up to using the official ones because we'll try as hard as we can, but there's gonna the people who wrote the test will also be the best at writing the practice test because they know all of the questions, right? So they are the best, and I think that it's important to like, most of the people are preparing with a vendor. If you are, use that vendor kind of up until a point, but when you want to get to the very end, that last month, you should really be relying on those official practice tests, especially because, some of the vendors, not us, but some of the other ones, I've heard that the accuracy can be off sometimes, right? So it's very important to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the thing. If you're only relying on third party practice tests, you could get a very distorted sense of where you stand, both in both directions. I've had some students think, oh, I won't say the name of the vendor, but whatever. Like, I'm taking this party's practice test, I'm crushing it, I'm good to go, and then all of a sudden, wait a minute, like, well, what ends up happening in my experience is that third party companies practice tests reward how well you learn that company's strategies versus what's actually on.
Yeah, which like, it's sort of a natural fallacy. But at the end of the day, there's only one group making the test, that's the GRE. Yeah, and then I mean with the new shorter GRE, I feel like a lot more people are taking the test multiple times. Do you have any comments on what to do basically with the new GRE format if this changes at all? Like, instead of saying, okay, I've got 4 official practice tests left. I'm going to do them all before my first take, or do you hold one or two of those for like prepping for the second take, or is that all kind of, am I way overthinking this?
No, there's actually a valid point you're bringing up. So with a shortened exam, one thing I've noticed is a lot more volatility in student scores. Because you think about it, missing two questions on a shorter exam is going to have a more dramatic impact on your score. Meaning, since there's more volatility, to account for that, you want to ensure you could do multiple sittings to give yourself a chance to drown out what might be negative variance in a given sitting. So as a result
Mhm.
of that, yeah, I do recommend to students, when it comes to planning out your practice exams, plan two before your first sitting, and then two. Basically, if you think there's five total, one is diagnostic, you have four left. Two before your first sitting, and then two before your next sitting. And the timing actually works out well there because you have to wait 21 days between sittings.
Mhm.
So that you'll basically take that exam, two more practice tests, and then the next exam later.
Okay, great. And any thoughts on like, don't take a practice test within 3 days of the test or anything along those lines? I've heard some people give that kind of advice, and I'm
Yeah,
curious what you think.
yeah, absolutely. I'm definitely of that school. If you think about the purpose of the practice test, as we discussed, incorporate time management, guessing strategies, and to do, troubleshooting to identify any areas where you're still having difficulty. If you're taking that exam 3 days, the practice 3 days before your real exam, you're not going to gain much out of it. That's not enough time to really do any kind of review that you're going to benefit from. And if anything, in my experience, it just increases anxiety when it's that close. So the last practice exam, the general window you should aim for is a week between your last practice exam.
Great. Anything else we haven't covered yet that you wanted to make sure we talked about?
Uh, no, I think this is pretty comprehensive. Covered basically everything I want to get into.
Great. All right. Well, then this has been GRE Snack, hosted by Tyler from Achievable with Erfun Guela from GRE Compass. And Achievable has a great online GRE course you can try for free by going to achievable.me.